Hello, folks. Welcome to Switch. Let's get it on. With apologies to Marvin Gaye, it's time for the big one. Bazball Down Under. After months of talking, the 25-26 Ashes are almost upon us as Perth Stadium prepares to play host to the series opener. Are injury hit Australia there for the taking, or will England quickly find themselves up the Swan River without a paddle, as is so often the case on Ashes tours? To get you in the mood, as if you're not G'd up enough already, I've got two ESPN Cricinfo thoroughbreds on the line from Perth. Vithushan Ehantharajah and Alex Malcolm, fresh from another day at the paddock, checking out the runners and riders on match day -3. Good day, chaps. Vish, as you're the guest in Australia, did you get the front page treatment from the West Australian on arrival? Seems to be the treatment for Englishmen coming to Perth at the moment.
No. I was able to sneak in under the radar because they have bigger fish to fry and put in those newspapers, I suppose. But yeah, there was another good one today. England got papped playing golf yesterday by Channel 10, I believe, and also the photographers. Apparently, where they were on the ninth hole is very near a park, and I think security were going to get involved, but then they realized they couldn't get involved because they were in a park and they were allowed to do what they want. So, I think there was a few waves here and there, but I certainly haven't been subject to the Western Australian, and you know what? I'd like to keep it that way at least until I leave the state. Yeah.
Yet. Well, yeah, I'm sure you can get up to some hijinks that Alex will look after you. Perhaps one of the few Cricinfo staffers to have a Cricinfo player page. Alex, good to have you back on the pod. Is it good to be back in the West, your old stomping ground?
It's been a while. It's nice to be home, although not too many family members back here these days. Nice to spend some time with my dad, though, and I'll hope to see some friends over the next few days while I'm here. But obviously, a lot of excitement amongst the locals actually about this Test match. It seems like everyone I know is going to come at some stage during the 5 days if it goes that long, or hopefully it goes that long. But there's huge excitement. Certainly, guys I played a lot of cricket with and who love the game can't remember a build up like this, particularly in Perth. And there's going to be a huge crowd expected here. I've covered a number of Test matches at this ground. It's never been full, and it looks like Friday will be the first time that's the case. So, yeah, so much anticipation and excitement. And, yeah, the West have been doing their bit. It should be noted, actually, that the West current editor is the same man who was running the Courier Mail back in the don't name that fast bowler days just over 10 years ago. So, yeah, we're rinse and repeat every time England come down here.
It's an orchestrated plot. I didn't know this. Speaking of that 17-18 tour, have you taken Vish yet to the bar where Johnny Bairstow headbutted Cameron Bancroft?
Believe it or not, it's closed. It's closed for good.
Yeah.
It closed down a few weeks ago. It was quite sad news, actually, for many of my generation and before who spend a lot of time, far too much time, actually, in that bar, particularly after a hard day's grade cricket. We used to call it the Retrovision Roundup because they were the sponsors of the competition, and all the players from every club were there on a Saturday or a Sunday night. So, yeah, no, it's sad news, but yeah, no chance for Ben Duckett to revisit that place. And he did mention that he'd seen that it closed down, so they've got to head to different venues. But it seems like these days, particularly with both these sides, and especially with the age of the Australians, they're more interested in the golf courses rather than the bars here in Perth.
Yeah, as we've established, I think Vish is going to be on the lookout there for just players out. Getting around in the new sense rather than the old sense. Okay, let's get to it then. Both teams have been training today, I think, at Perth Stadium. And Vish, from an England perspective, Mark Wood was there bowling in the nets. And it sounds like despite his hamstring injury scare at the weekend, is potentially primed for this first outing.
Yeah, it happened about 8 hours ago. Mark Wood, with his left leg heavily strapped, was sitting on a chair, not really doing anything. And there was quite a big turnout for the nets, as you can imagine. This is the first training session that England have had ahead of this first test. And he went from or he might be out because he's sitting around doing nothing, to bowling for about 40 minutes, at which point everyone was like, well, he's bowling pretty quickly. I think the miles an hour of the estimates, it's already gone up by about 3 in the last 8 hours. Because he was about 90 miles an hour, and then a couple of deliveries kicked up, and all in all, it was very exciting, but also seemingly from England manager's perspective, expected as well. We were able to speak to Brendan McCullum, and Rob Keir was there as well. And the sense that we got from them was that they weren't actually worried about this, this hamstring strain or hamstring seizing up that took place last week at Lilac Hills in the game against the Lions. And I suppose they would say that. They said they kind of expected it. The fact that it was 2-4 over spells. Okay, not much bowling, but the bloke hasn't played a game since February 25, I think it was, which is the penultimate game of England's Champions Trophy campaign. He then obviously went and had surgery on that left knee and has basically been recovering ever since. The thing we're always told behind the scenes, even as early as August, was that, he's fine, but we just want to make sure. We just want to basically get him to the Ashes. And it's almost like actually whatever hitch there was last week, even if it was a bit more serious, he still would have stayed on, because this is basically what they're building towards. This is why they've been so careful with him. This is why they gave him, one of those 5 3-year contracts a couple of years ago. And so it would take a lot for them to think, you know what, now that we've got him here, let's send him home. But it was promising. And obviously the bigger day comes tomorrow when England train in the afternoon, and he's got to wake up and see what his body's saying, and then come in and probably put in a very similar shift. Because, I think as I mentioned in the piece that I've just submitted, to them, this is the fastest wicket they're going to play on in this series. They're likely to not play a spinner, neither Shoaib Bashir nor Will Jacks. And I suppose when you have a pace attack of 5, essentially, then you can probably carry someone, or certainly they believe they can carry someone, and it helps if that someone they're carrying is the fastest bowler in the world. So all in all, a pretty promising first day at the Optus for England, yeah.
I mean, it sounds very much like the sense is England are going to throw everything at this first test, which is understandable. But if Wood, who hasn't played since February in the Champions Trophy, breaks down in the first test and then goes home, then you've succeeded in getting him to Australia. But there's surely an argument that keeping him, trying to preserve his body to play in maybe 2 of the 5 tests rather than a bit of the first one would be the more sort of sensible route.
Oh, definitely, yeah. I mean, I ascribe to that. I believe that. I think that if there was any doubt, he shouldn't play this test, and knowing that there's ample time between now and the second test in Brisbane, and the fact that he performed well in the pink ball game in the series in 21-22, that's great. It feels like the odds are still very much stacked in his favour for that game as well, and that's me being sensible. And while this is a more sensible England setup at the moment compared to, I suppose, where they were in 2022, I think they have, because they have so much on this current iteration of Mark Wood, and because they have a captain who grew up with him and knows him well, and actually knows when to reel him in, ironically, given that people don't seem to have that understanding of Stokes himself. But Stokes knows what makes Mark Wood tick. And, there was even a suggestion that actually while England were the beneficiary of that positive scan last week, that actually it was probably better for Mark Wood's psyche that he was, he was put under the microscope to a point, and they were able to show him that actually, you're all right. It's almost like dealing with a bit of a hypochondriac here because he's had so many issues. But yeah, I mean, I'm absolutely with you, Alan. But you're preaching to the choir here on that front. But because this is the first test, because Alex mentioned the build up there, because it has been so full on that they maybe want to ride that wave and go guns blazing with Wood at the forefront.
Well, I'm glad you haven't lost your marbles. I mean, Alex, Australia in hamstring injury news and the kind of fast bowler preservation society kind of updates. It's all been going England's way. Australia have lost now 2 of the big 3. It looks like a debutant is being lined up in Brendan Doggett, who will be the first debutant Australian fast bowler in 4 years, and something like the 6th in the last 12 or 11, 12, something like that. Some crazy stats kind of floating around that front, which shows you how important the main 3, Stark, Cummins, and Hazelwood, have been. Is there a sense that England have to throw everything at this first test? Australia are now down 2 key players. There's a bit of uncertainty over the batting. England, clearly, there's no way that any England supporter would get overconfident given England's record in Australia over the years. But England themselves have got to kind of just keep a handle on it all, knowing that this is a big opportunity, but Australia don't just get rolled over in their own backyard very often.
No, and the last time they played an Ashes test in Australia where 2 of the big 3 were missing, Australia won pretty comfortably. So, they've had a reasonable record when they haven't had all of them, but it's such a rare occasion. You spoke of how few guys have debuted. It speaks to the record of those 3 guys. They've all got over 295 wickets each in Test match cricket. It's incredible. They've been so durable. And there's just been no opportunity. Scott Boland said it yesterday. He's only played 16 tests, I think, since debuting in 4 years ago. There's just been no chance for anybody else to get a look in because they've plotted the course so well as well, and that's been a key part of the planning for the coaching staff, the medical staff, and the high performance team. Every year they have planning meetings in May and April about the year ahead and the 18 months that's coming. And the number one item agenda is how do we keep those 4, bowling included, on the park? And they've done it successfully, but now they've had 2 go down. It was interesting, though, watching Pat Cummins bowl in the nets yesterday. So he actually bowled more overs yesterday than Mark Wood bowled today. And he arguably bowled as well, if not better. And it sort of fulfilled a prophecy that Andrew McDonald said a couple of weeks ago to us, the journalists covering the Australian team. He said, you'll turn up in Perth and see Pat Cummins bowl and ask the question why he's not playing. And I got that question asked by 2 of the visiting England journalists who were there watching. He go, why is he not playing? He's close. And they're expecting that he's a really good chance to be back for Brisbane. So it might be a one-off opportunity for Brendan Doggett, but his record in first-class cricket is outstanding, particularly over the last 13 games. He's taken 7 5-wicket hauls, 4 of which have been 6-wicket hauls. Has an ability to bowl high 130s into the 140s, skiddy, swings the new ball away, can nip the ball back and into the right hander and away from the lefty. Just has an ability to take wickets in bunches, and he's super fit as well, very lean. Over the last 2 winters, he's actually spent 2 of the last 3 winters. Sorry, he's been competing in Ironman triathlons. For those that don't know, so the 3.8k swim, 180k ride, 42k runs, and some of the times he's posted in that, like just over 4 hours, are elite. So he's an incredible athlete, and he should bowl well on this surface. Alex Carey, who's played a lot with him at South Australia, said he should enjoy bowling on this wicket. He took 6 wickets at the Wacker a couple of weeks ago in a Shield game. The surface is obviously quite similar, same clay base. So yeah, he'll enjoy the opportunity, and England they shouldn't rest on their laurels with him in the side, nor Boland, nor Stark, obviously. So it's a great opportunity for England. You never get a better look than this, but Australia are always hard to beat here.
Well, yeah, we know that. That seems like one of the more straightforward selection calls, although neither team has been announced yet. England's must be in the post, Vish, but we'll come to that. The tougher one, Alex, seems to be over this sort of interlocking debate about whether Cam Green is going to bat at 3, as he has done, or if he's going to return to sort of an all-rounder role, and that's, dependent on his fitness, really. And then Jake Weatherald debuts as an opener, the other option being Marnus Labuschagne to resurrect the cameo from the World Test Championship final. What's the current thinking? What's your feeling on that?
It seems like Weatherald will make his debut. Labuschagne will be reinstated at 3 and Green at 6. We haven't been given an indication of it, and it does appear that actually hasn't been communicated to the players either yet. A decision may be finalised tonight, and players either told tonight or tomorrow morning. Australia's got their last main train session tomorrow. They had an optional session today. A number of the bowlers and Webster actually missed the session. Stark, Webster, Doggett were all missing today, but a lot of the batters, including Green, were there. So, yeah, it's looking like they're going that way. And, Australia's selectors have kind of painted themselves into a corner given the way that they've sort of worked that opening position since Warner retired. So if Weatherall plays, Khawaja will have his 7th opening partner in the last 16 tests, which is incredible. And obviously Labuschagne got sent away because of form, and they manufactured Green at 3, probably a bit of a gamble in the West Indies and also the WTC final. In the end, he actually worked it out. He was arguably Australia's best batter in the last 2 tests they played on brutally tough surfaces in Grenada and Jamaica, and he got a 50 in Grenada and then 2 40s in Jamaica, where only 4 scores over 24 were made in the game, and no one got to 50. So yeah, it will provide a bit more security with the batting. Obviously, Labuschagne gets back to his preferred position. He's been in spectacular form in domestic cricket for Queensland. They obviously didn't want to move Smith or Head, and so Webster's probably going to be unlucky given that Green's fit. He bowled 16 overs in the last game, last Shield game for Western Australia. He was clocked at over 140k an hour in his first spell. It was hostile. He knocked over one of the Queensland openers and really troubled Labuschagne, and Renshaw ended up getting 100 in that game. So they're confident that he can bowl at least that many, and they're confident too, it seems, that the all-rounder's not going to need to bowl more than 16 for Australia. And actually, even though Hazelwood's not there was a thought maybe that with Hazelwood out that they might need the extra bowling. It's probably the other way, actually. With Hazelwood not there, the insurance maybe isn't needed given Doggett's freshness and his fitness. So, it seems they'll go that way. I don't think there'll be any surprises, but you never know.
Bish, the selection issues for England, the main talking point has also been about the top of the order, the top 3, but Ollie Pope has pretty much put that one to bed. England like to name their team a couple of days out, so we'll perhaps find out tomorrow. But after scoring 190 at Lilac Hill, Jacob Bethel's case seemed to have his hopes there had dwindled anyway, but Pope has put his stamp on the spot at the start of this tour.
Yeah. And I envisage that they'll frame it as if we were the ones asking about an issue that didn't exist. But I think obviously deep down that England know this is a talking point of their own making. I was going to say a problem, actually, but I'll come back to that. It's certainly been a talking point of their own making, not least because of whether it was a bit of miscommunication at the start of the English summer with Stokes saying that Bethel's going to come back in and not quite specifying whether it was the 11 or the squad, right down to the very end of the summer when they take vice captaincy off Ollie Pope and give it to Harry Brook, and thus, it feels like it's easier to drop Ollie Pope. And then when we talk to McCullum at the end of the summer, he makes a point about how nothing's necessarily set in stone for the Ashes. Now, bear in mind that they've essentially been building for this for the last 3 years, and that was the only point where, that was the only position where there was a bit of flux in the year leading up to this Ashes. Then, obviously people are going to have that conversation. The reason why they wouldn't necessarily frame it as a problem is because it sounds like that they've learned something from Ollie Pope that they hadn't actually learned from vice captaincy and thus captaincy per se, but because of the way he seems to have handled some of the scrutiny. For instance, scoring 100 in that first test against India, when there was talk about whether Bethel should play, in the way he's dealt with those particular situations, even the way he dealt with the tour game last week, which for all intents and purposes, he did have the benefit of being named as the number 3 in the specific England team, while Bethel was number 3 for the Lions. But of all the things that could have gone wrong, including Mark Wood, having that tight hamstring, Ollie Pope failing, maybe even just once, but certainly twice, would have been an issue that they'd have to address, or would have been an issue that they would have to at least contend with, even if they did end up going with sticking with Ollie Pope. And the benefit for them is that with those scores of 190, they came into this week on their 2 days off, pretty much only wondering about Mark Wood, not even worrying about that. And there is a sense that because Pope to them is so much more robust and a bit more of a banker, that I don't know, like, I wasn't here for the warm-up game, but the way people were talking about it was that it was a side to him they hadn't seen before, that he wasn't particularly frenetic. And obviously, Lilac Hill's barely got above the knee for most of the batters, and, it's not any gauge on how he might fare on this pitch right in front of me here at the Optus Stadium. But there was people were even writing about the fact that, maybe he might have a series like Alistair Cook had in 10-11. I mean, I think that's kind of ridiculous, but I certainly didn't think people would be talking about Ollie Pope in those terms 3 months ago, 6 months ago, heck, even 2 years ago, because his record in Australia is objectively poor. I think it's 15 overall and 11, something like that, in Australia outright, albeit from 3 tests on that 21-22 tour. But he's made everything a bit easier for him. He looked, very settled at training, and obviously you can only go by so much, but he's often the one, he almost knows that we're often there to watch him. And maybe because this time it wasn't the case. But yeah, he looked pretty at ease. He was, chatting to a few people who stood nearby. He didn't seem to mind when I was hovering behind the nets waiting to get a shot of Mark Wood. And some people do object to that, and understandably, because it feels like you're marking their homework, which I suppose is our job, actually, come to think of it. But yeah, I don't know what kind of series he's going to have, but they're certainly not worried about what his contributions might be. And it might even be the kind of series where if he sticks to his average, his career average, which is, 38, if he's 38 consistent across the board, I think they will take that right now at number 3.
I'm chalking him up for 766 runs now. You've
there you go. Yeah.
10-11. He certainly got some time in the middle. There's been plenty of talk, and we don't need to get too into it because, all the warm-ups are done now, but there was only one 3-day game intra-squad, and Joe Root and Harry Brook in particular didn't spend a lot of time in the middle. Ben Stokes said, we've done what we can with what we're given, basically, and that's kind of the reality of the international cricket schedule. England, the one-day team and the coaches were in New Zealand sort of 2.5 weeks ago. Presumably they would have loved Root to have spent a bit longer in the middle, Brook to have spent a bit longer in the middle, and perhaps not got out charging or ramping or whatever it was he did against the Quicks. But that won't, I'm guessing, be playing on anyone's mind in the England camp.
Well, we don't know. We got to wait till the team sheet, don't we? We don't know if their cards are going to be marked for that. It doesn't seem. Yeah. I mean, Alan, I'm sure you don't think that either. That there is anything to not necessarily to worry about, but any kind of question over those two generally. But it is quite interesting because just speaking to people over here, so much is on those two, really. And yeah, I don't know if that was a product of what they did last week, but no one has really come into this week thinking, well, they didn't get scores last week. This could be a whole different series. And maybe the injuries to Hazelwood and Cummins have taken a bit of, I suppose, a bit of focus away from, I suppose, the scorecard last week. But yeah, I mean, I don't think there's any fears about that at all. I think they will have known as individuals coming into this, so much relies upon them. It was interesting, actually, as part of I didn't use this in the look back at the COVID Ashes piece that I did, but Harry Brook was in the crowd for day one of the last series because the Lions were there concurrently, and he was in the crowd, and he messaged a few of the players in the England team that night. Because the noise of Rory Burns' dismissal was so loud, he basically, said he'd never heard anything like it, and basically he wanted to feel that. He wanted to be, but obviously he wanted to play international cricket, but he wanted to be in those kind of series. This is probably his first taste of it. Bear in mind that he missed the Tour of India as well. This will be the biggest game of his career. This is the biggest series of his career, and he's got to be up for it. They all have to be up for it. That's what they've told us. But I think he, in particular, I'm not earmarking him for a big, big series, but I do get a sense he wants to come in and be the big player. He probably wants to take the limelight away from Root, as he sort of did in that last partnership against India at the Oval, where they both should have won the game. But yeah, he is the one in particular. They're obviously going to go through him, and they'd be stupid not to, particularly because of his penchant for a hook. But yeah, every time he's on the field, every time he is in focus out in the middle, it's something's going to happen, and it just is. The thing is about how long those periods of happening will be.
Right. Well, the heat of Ashes battle is about to be met. The first test starting on Friday. As Alex mentioned, excitement is high in Perth. They didn't get a Ashes test 4 years ago because of COVID regulations. So it's unsurprising that there's going to be a warm welcome. I'm guessing that the bounce is going to be a bit higher than it was at Lilac Hill. Alex, you've been described as the safest voice in Australian cricket. Have you got warming words for the home fans about what sort of cauldron that England should be expecting when the first ball is bowled? And well, given the history of first balls in Ashes cricket, they better be on the lookout.
The only thing I'd say about that is there's a massive expat community here. A lot of people have made a life in Perth coming from the UK. They might outnumber them, as India tend to do when India tour Australia. So it could be a 50-50 split. It could be 60-40 in the favour of the UK fans. So apparently England fans are going to overrun Australia throughout this series. Everyone coming out for a wonderful holiday and seeing a team that possibly could win here. So it's going to be interesting. I think it'll be fever pitch. The surface, I spoke to someone who has had a look at it. They said it looks pretty good, but there's a lot of grass on it at the moment. The curator, Isaac McDonald, put a bit of water into it yesterday. The big thing here is trying to keep it together early so it doesn't crack too early in the game, because the weight is clay that comes from Harvey down south in West Australia, as it was with the old Wacker. The Wacker pitches are getting a bit tired and probably play a little differently these days. But it does crack up under the heat without any water in it after 3 days. So generally, last year was incredible. There was 17 wickets fell on the first day. Australia bowled India out for 150 and then lost 7 wickets that night. Bumrah was unplayable, and then it flattened out day 2 and day 3. So here, the best time to bat is after lunch day 2. So the team that's in a strong position at that point, either with wickets in the shed or batters to come, in a position to bat for the next sort of 4 sessions, could dictate the game. And then batting last on this surface has proven impossible. No team has ever won batting second here in 5 test matches. So, and the bounce should be pretty steep. It's funny, the Australian bowlers haven't had that much success here. But they've won games. They've won 4 out of 5 test matches. But Lyon's been the one that's been the best bowler here. He loves the bounce on this surface and gets a bit of turn. Cummins has had trouble here. It's his least favourite surface, mainly because his bounce is too steep. He has trouble hitting the stumps. Stark, likewise. Hazelwood's bowled well here. But, there's a potential that the skiddier operators in bowling and Doggett could enjoy bowling here, because it's a bit like Bumrah. It's a bit easier for them to hit the stumps from that 5.5, 6 metre length. So, it'll be interesting. It's a great place to bat if you get in. And Jaiswal and Kohli showed that last year. Craig Brathwaite got 100 out here for the West Indies in the 4th innings. So if the England guys can get used to the bounce early and be, we're talking about this newly cultivated Bazball 2.0 or whatever the batters are doing, making better decisions. If they can be a little bit more disciplined than normal early on, potentially not play off vertically off the back and the front foot, on the up early, then if they can settle in and get used to that extra 4 to 6 inches of bounce that you don't normally get especially in England, but other places in Australia, then it's a good place to cash in. But, it's about taking the first 30 balls. That was always the lesson here in Western Australia. And you got told by all the old guys, you got to give yourself those first 30 balls to get a sense of what's happening. So that'll be the challenge.
I think I'm right in saying this is the ground with the highest batting average among Australian grounds of the past sort of 4 or 5 years.
That's right. I went back. There's only been 5 overseas batters who've scored hundreds in Australia in the last since the start of the 2021-22 Ashes, and 3 of them have come here. So the other one in Sydney, Johnny Bairstow, and one in Melbourne, which was Nitish Kumar Reddy last year. So, 2 to Kohli and Jaiswal. And, Kohli was on his last legs. He retired at the end of the series, but still got 100 here. And then, Craig Bathwaite got 1 in a 4th innings where they lost, but he batted really well. So, it's a good place to bat. Marnus Labuschagn's got a double 100 out here. Steve Smith a double out here. David Warner made 160 here a couple of years ago, opening the batting on day 1. So, if you get in and you know what you're doing, you can cash in.
Yeah, speaking of hundreds, I guess is a good point to mention. The West Australian called him Dud Root, I think, but Average Joe, the focus on that first, if it's to come 100 in Australia, Vish, is for Root is not going anywhere. I mean, no Cummins, no Hazelwood, the best batting ground in Australia. It's got to be.
What could possibly go wrong?
Yeah,
what
exactly.
What could possibly go wrong? Yeah,
just make it harder for him. All the expectation and scrutiny.
Yeah. But then you replace those 2 with an Iron Man. Apparently, that's something new to worry about. He's been dismissed quite a few times by Nathan Lyon as well. But again, this is just the product of playing Australian, particularly this Australian attack, so often. It's funny. He's towed. He's wheeled out the same line for the last, I'm gonna say, like 3 months now, close to 4 months, about this 100 in Australia, and about how this is not a tour for him to, finally strike a mark in that column. It's for England to try and win the Ashes in Australia. And obviously to do that, Joe Root needs to have a good series. So it's about him focusing on having a good series with the bat. And between the lines, he will need to score hundreds in doing so. It's such an interesting thing because we're not just talking about this series. We're also sort of talking about a player's legacy as well. And a player who's just, who recently moved to number 2 on the all-time list in terms of test runs. And I think a lot of the talk around Joe Root has been about Joe Root. For example, Jamie Smith was asked today about Joe Root's hundreds. And Smith then peddled the same line that Joe Root has been peddling about. It's about doing well for the team and, doing his job, scoring runs and this, that, and the other. And then got to talking about how good an influence he is around the dressing room and how helpful he is to young batters and that he always gives you bits of advice here and there. And this is probably the first time in a while, actually, that Root comes into a series where he doesn't necessarily have the answers. He'll have a way of working out what he needs to do based on experience, but he doesn't have the answers. He had the answers, eventually worked out for the India series in 24 when he struggled. But by and large, over the last 3 years, since the summer of COVID, where he was able to strip away his game and work out ways of converting all those 50s into hundreds, he did so with, at least, some of the answers in particular, but that he'd already had, but also a bit of consultation. And he's been quite coy about who he's consulted with and what he's consulted, and what in particular he was consulting about. But he's made hints that he's done the same thing ahead of this series. And I suppose we'll find out what they are. One of the big things is obviously the release shot to third and the running it down. And it's about how the bounce over here is, has made that a riskier shot when he's a banker, most other places in the world. Alex was talking about, the extra bounce here and how that affects bowlers. And I wonder what that release shot looks like now. Is it a shot that he plays when the ball's a bit fuller and he knows it's going to be at the height that he prefers it? Or has he just got rid of it altogether, and what becomes that manoeuvring shot for him. And we're about to find out. It's going to be fascinating to see him play that ramp scoop at a place like this, because just by extrapolation, surely that shot is more on when it bounces, when the bounce is more consistent and greater and steeper, and thus more reliable. So I don't know. Maybe he plays it more often. Maybe it's not just a shot that he plays after 100. Maybe it's a shot he ends up playing after 30. So yeah, we'll find out. I mean, there's so much on it, but yeah, it's going to be fascinating to see not just how he does at the end of the series, but how he goes about, I suppose, getting this monkey off his back.
The look on Alex's face there when you mentioned that reverse ramp, I'm wondering what his technical view is on playing that in Perth or anywhere in Australia.
It's a spectacular option here to very full deliveries because it's the shortest boundary, the ball flies, but anything back of a length, it's really difficult to play. So the guys here, like Josh Inglis plays it a lot here when in white ball games, and he's a gun at it, but they're looking for Yorker length, predicting Yorker length, and it can carry it for 6. But trying to do that to a 6 metre length climbing from a guy bowling from 6'4", that's a big ask. We'll see how we go. I wouldn't recommend it, but anyway.
On the Australian view of Root's record, Alex, Darren Lehmann does need that 100 to be convinced, but Root has obviously scored runs in Australia. I think he averages 35. He's recently moved beyond Ponting. Ricky Ponting, second to Sachin Tendulkar, obviously in the overall Test run scoring list. To look at a comparable example, Ponting scored 100 in India, but only averaged 26. We're presumably not holding that against him in terms of his greatness. But it probably matters more to England's chances of victory, Root doing well, than whether the sort of Australian public are going to be happy with his status in the pantheon of Test batters.
I don't know. I think those who actually know the game and follow English cricket during Australia's winter realise Root's greatness, regardless of whether he's got 100 here or not. I did find it quite amusing that Matthew Hayden, speaking on that topic, actually has a lower average in England than Root does, even though he got 100 in a test that ended up being a losing draw at the Oval in 2005 on a pretty flat surface, it must be said. Anyway, no, Root's played well out here. I thought he played pretty well at times during the last series, but of course the weight on his shoulders. I mean, Vish wrote that wonderful feature on the COVID tour that England endured 4 years ago, and the weight that was on his shoulders and the things he was dealing with, no captain has ever had to deal with coming out here, regardless from England or anywhere else in the world. He still, I think from memory, got the pitch they played on the MCG where Scott Boland took 6 for 7 was the worst pitch they played on in that series, and he still made 50 from memory. Played one of the best innings in the match alongside Marcus Harris, who's a bit of a forgotten man. He played really well then, and he's a good player. It's just certain conditions in certain places don't quite suit guys. I mean, Steve Smith's record in South Africa isn't that flash, but his record everywhere else is phenomenal. So there's some places and some matchups and some moments in time in a long career. In Smith's case, he had his own burdens in South Africa during a couple of those tours, and that might be the reason why his numbers are slightly down there. So, these things happen, but also Root's running into 3 of the greatest fast bowlers that Australia and the globe has ever seen. So, conditions have been suiting them during those tours, and he's also bounced around the order a little bit at times as well. So, yeah, he's a great player. His record out here is reasonably good, especially considering the conditions the last tour that he came. And he does hold the key, and Australia certainly do respect him. I know they do within the 4 walls, that's for sure.
Well, and as we mentioned, 2 of those 3 guys aren't involved in this first test. So, Vish, your piece on the site about the last tour, not only Australia unfortunately dealing with injury issues, and that's going to affect the 11 they put out, certainly in this first test. But England are winning in every sense because they're not having to put up with COVID bubbles and all of the extra mental baggage that they took on last time. Obviously, talk about mentality and baseball and playing with your feet are and everything, but it's going to be a completely different experience this time around for lots of reasons.
Yeah, 100%. And the appointment of even Rob Key before McCullum and Stokes were brought in was ultimately English cricket was pushed to that point by that series. Now, obviously, the pandemic went on longer than 2-3 month stretch in Australia, but because the results went a certain way and the team were at such a low ebb, even, bear in mind that there was a West Indies tour to come, that it ended up losing 1-0. But there was such a low ebb that they really did think, right, we need to just do things completely differently, go completely the other way. In an extreme that you only really see with like the nationality of the coach. Like the coach, they're obviously often used to go from English overseas, and that used to be the, I suppose the swings. And this was just, right, we just need to do the whole thing at the very top a completely different way. And obviously, with no COVID, this Australia tour is completely different. Even in the last 2 days, when they arrived we're just knowing that they were going to be situated here rather than at Lilac Hills, just so many different things have gone on. Like players, they were playing golf yesterday. Some, Brian Cast and David Saker and Tim Southey went fishing off. Is it Rottnest? Is that how you pronounce it, Alex? Yeah. A few players went also went there, but went to the beach as well. I think Cotslow as well, which is maybe a 25-minute ride from their team hotel. A few of them went and chilled out there. The England Lions, by the way, had a bit of a fitness day, and rather than they were going to come to the ground and basically just do laps of the place and do their fitness thing here, but what they decided to do is they set up a treasure hunt throughout Perth. And there were loads of different spots they had to hit to essentially win this competition. It's a bit like orienteering, basically. And so you had people were bumping into like Asa Tribe and, a couple of other players as part of the team who were running around doing all these different things. Essentially, the goal was to run a certain distance in a certain period of time, but they just made it fun. And there's no way they obviously would never have been able to do that last time out, but also in previous non-COVID Ashes, like let's say 17-18, for example, they were very strict on that. And even though they were fitness heavy, they were very strict on trying to play it as sensibly as possible, which is why the situation at the Avenue was so outrageous, and actually what triggered the midnight curfew that's still in effect to this day. So yeah, just the entire vibe about it is completely different. Now, obviously, it's not to say that this will go. Does not mean it's going to guarantee that this series will go a completely different way come the end of it. But they're giving itself a much better chance by just, I suppose, embracing Australia as a country. Not just as a high-profile Ashes series. There is a real sense that England are very lucky to be here professionally and personally for the experience, and I think that will go a long way to, even just this week in terms of approaching the start of this series with a bit more excitement than a lingering sense of dread.
England going out there to embrace Australia. Right? Is Australia ready to embrace England? I think we're pretty much done for this one. I think, but I do want to ask a predictions corner. Vish has got a good record on this, and I don't know.
I got one good call. And it was 2-2 and 2023. Yeah.
Yeah, but I'm not going to put you on the spot, but I noticed our columnist Greg Chappell on the site today. Title of his piece is "Will this Ashes be the making of Bazball 2.0?" Yeah, Alex, Vish, what's you don't have to say what the score is going to be, but yeah, what are your feelings for this one?
You want me to go? I honestly, I have no idea.
Of course, yeah.
Zero idea. Like, how can you possibly? It's exactly the same as 23. Like, how could you possibly predict the most unpredictable team in the world playing against, a team that there's some unknowns in Australia's camp. You just don't know. I've got no idea how this is going to go. I think I did say in 23 the best catching team will win. I think the same thing will apply here. I think both sides will give a lot of chances. They're just the way that both teams are going to play. And I think the team that holds the most chances will probably win. But I could definitely see a world where England blow Australia away in at least one test. I think they could win 2, 3. Seems a huge ask. I guess with England's, I'm not convinced England's bowlers have the fitness base that a lot of people have been talking about. I think that it's very, very difficult down here, and there'll be some hard slogs. And the way that England's batters bat, just giving them the time to turn around. I mean, that's what's undone Josh Hazlewood in the Shield game just recently. New South Wales only batted for 50 overs. And he had to bowl and back up again, and that's what happened in Perth last year. Australia only batted for about 50 overs, and they had to bowl 3 days in a row, and Hazlewood broke down. So that's a big part of it as well, is giving their bowlers who are all, have some injury concerns and bowl high octane, high intensity type stuff. They need the rest. So, yeah, it'll be interesting to see how it goes. But, yeah, Australia's vulnerable, no doubt about it, have been for years. They were vulnerable against Pakistan 2 years ago. West Indies took a test off them in Australia. India nearly pinched a series off them. So, yeah, they are vulnerable, but they're always hard to beat. So, yeah, I've got no idea.
Yeah, same. I have absolutely no clue. Yeah. I feel like, obviously, with the loss of Hazlewood and Cummins for this first test, that shifts things England's way, but it also, I think I'm only saying that really because there's such big misses that if England don't win this first one, I think they're probably screwed for the rest of the series. And it was already an important test for them to try and bank early. So I think I predicted 3-1 on something with Matt. I don't want to be the guy who has 2 different predictions in 2 different spaces. I'll probably have to stick with that, but yeah, 3-1 to Australia, and this is the most likely one here in Perth.
Okay, well, at least that would give us something. It's 15 years since England won a test in Australia, and hopefully, whatever the case, cricket is the winner, or golf. Anyway, that's I think enough for this one. One last final pre-Ashes pod before it all gets going. We're just a few days out from the coin going up at the Optus, and then it's time to earn. We'll be back to see if Perth can light a fire under the series. Until then, my thanks to Vish and Alex, and to you all for tuning in. Please feel free to rate us on your preferred pod platform and keep up with all the latest on espncricinfo.com.